all about women. A voter bloc that both Mitt Romney and President Obama are working very hard to win over. And women have preferred the Democratic candidate for president in the last 5 elections, but the gap this time is shrinking. And with social issues back in the national discourse, this is going to be a key group to watch as this 2012 campaign progresses. So joining me today is an all-star panel to talk women in politics: GOP strategist Leslie Sanchez, Michelle Bernard, founder of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, Stephanie Shriock, president of Emily's List, Democratic strategist Maria Cardona, and anchor of the Washington Post, She the People Forum, Melinda Henenberger. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's great to have all of you. I know we're going to have a great discussion about this because you're all experts on this in politics. And Leslie, I want to start with you because we've had some interesting rhetoric already this campaign season where Democrats have accused Republican elected officials of waging a war on women. What do you make of that?
I think it's definitely a clear case that women, independent women, suburban women, the Walmart moms are going to be key in the election like they have since going back to the 1980s. But if you just look at the fact that 17 million women have fallen into poverty, 800,000 more than when the president took office, and even for women of color, Hispanic women, 1 out of 4 now are increasing the rate in their rate of poverty. Women are looking at these candidates and really looking for solutions. Who can commit and make a promise and get this economy going? And that's fundamentally where the battle's going to lie.
Do you think there's a war on women, though, Leslie?
I don't think there's a war on women. I think there's a war in rhetoric. You know, we've come a long way, but not far enough where we can get past maybe some of the sexism that's existing certainly in American politics. But more so, I think women are critical to deciding who the next president's going to be, and people are going to use any mechanism to either illuminate or disguise the reality of this economic condition. And the reality is that women are suffering at a higher rate than most, and especially women of color.
You know, Laura, can I just add something to what Leslie said? If you sit back and you think to yourself, you know, pretty objectively when you ask the question, is there a war on women, one of the things I think that you absolutely have to look at is some of the rhetoric that's not necessarily coming from the Romney campaign, but it's coming from Republicans all over the country, and it is doing terrible damage to the Republican brand. It's doing terrible damage to Mitt Romney, and then add on to that some of the things that we have seen come out of the Romney campaign, and you have to say to yourself, well, maybe there really is, in fact, a war on women. You know,
what do you mean specifically?
Well, for example, in Wisconsin earlier this year, Governor Scott Walker signed a bill basically repealing a law that had provided for a mechanism for women to protect themselves against sex discrimination in the workplace. And I'm going to quote here because I find it fascinating. A Republican state senator, Glenn Grotham, and I'm quoting him here when he's talking about the bill that was repealed, and he says that you could argue, quote unquote, that money is more important for men. I think that a guy in their first job, maybe because they expect to be a breadwinner someday, may be a little bit more money conscious. Well, that's a state legislator in Wisconsin who's supposed to be representing the entire state. That's men and women. Now say that to a single woman who's trying to raise her children, put groceries on the table, buy gasoline, get her kids through school, and she's got to be scratching her head and thinking to herself, what on earth are you talking about? Money is just as important to me as it is a man.
Mm-hmm. And Nora, if I may just add to that, you know, you can call it what you want to call it, war on women, but it's war on women's economics, it's war on women's health care, it's war on women's opportunities. And, you know, in hearing that the Republican Party has a vision for the economy, I mean, the truth of the matter is in 2010, we saw a Republican wave come in because they were talking about jobs. And then when the Republican Party took over the House of Representatives and so many of our legislatures all over the country, what we began to witness week by week by week is another attack to dismantle all of the freedoms and the rights that women have fought for decades in our health care, in our economic opportunities, from defunding Planned Parenthood to dismantling our economic opportunities for collective bargaining. It has been nonstop. I think there's very much a Republican war on women, and at Emily's List, We just came out of the field with a national poll where we talked to these independent women, these ones right in the middle, these ones that are going to decide this election. Today, in that group, you take out the Democrats, you take out the Republicans, these independent women are giving Obama an 8-point lead today. But what's so amazing in this poll, Norah, is that we found that a lot of these independent women just haven't focused entirely on the issues that are facing the country because, well, they're busy. My goodness, they're raising families, they've got a job or two, they're worried about the soccer games in the afternoon, dinner at night. And when we start sharing with these independent women where the Republican Party wants to take us, both on the economy, by continuing these tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, and on our reproductive health care, these independent women move to the Democrats incredibly quickly, and I believe that is precisely what's going to happen again in this election this November.
And Norah, this is Maria, and also to add to that and also to comment on something that Leslie said, because I do think that women of color are definitely suffering disproportionately in this recession. You know, she cites numbers, and Republicans like to cite numbers about the number of women who are now in poverty, when in fact all of that is due to the huge gaping recession, the economic hole that President Obama was handed. And in fact, his policies have put in place a mechanism that has helped a lot of Latino families, Latina women get jobs, Latina women be able to keep their health care. And in speaking about health care, the health care plan really speaks to what Latino families need. The whole issue about being able to protect children with pre-existing conditions, being able to keep your child on your health care if you're a parent and your child is younger than 26. I was having a live chat, a historic live chat 2 days ago with the First Lady, Michelle Obama, and a group of 6 Latina women. And one of the things they talked about was the health care plan. One of them was a single woman, and she was so thankful that she was now able to keep her son on a health care plan that he couldn't have before because he had a pre-existing condition. So these are all huge issues, and when they look at what Rodney is saying and what the Republicans are saying, you know, I don't like the sort of war on rhetoric, and I think Leslie is right that there is that, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of these independent women, Latina women included, have nowhere else to go but say, yes, well, there clearly is a war on us because all of these policies that they're talking about are hurtful to our families.
Leslie, let me ask you, do you think, Leslie, there's any truth to that? I mean, we do know that overall the President's health care reform bill was not viewed positively by the American people. But when you look individually at some of the protections that were included inside it, those are very popular. The one that Maria talked about, protecting those with pre-existing conditions like children who may have them, and then also some of the preventative care that's provided in there, like for your children, you don't have to pay a copay on immunizations. Well, women can get mammograms if they're under Medicare, they won't have to pay for those. And also, of course, birth control, which set off that big debate that we're all familiar with. Do you think, Leslie, there is some vulnerability for Republican candidates out there on that issue with women if they're saying they want to get rid of some of these protections that women and their children enjoy?
Well, there's no doubt that Republicans and Democrats, and even Republican women legislators, let's talk about this, have fought very much for many of those protections that we share. And there was common ground, certainly with respect to pre-existing conditions. These were in the national debate, there was a lot of common ground in that space. I think where Republicans have to be very careful is that understanding women are looking at the health care issue as an economic issue as well. And very much of what Michelle said is right on point. The distinction is, I don't think we can argue that women look at this as a one-size-fits-all, that everybody was trying to fight for certain types of services or every aspect of the health care law, which is still viewed unfavorably, especially among independent women. I think the reality is it's coming down to economics. Maria's talking about, you know, there's nowhere else to go. Actually, Republican, and I would say independent and suburban women particularly, are looking at both parties with a jaundiced eye. Who can stimulate the economy? While President Obama has a strong, favorable, and is very much liked within this constituent group, they don't think his policies have been particularly effective in their homes in bringing home paychecks. And that's, when it comes down to these pocketbook issues, who can make the best leadership decisions, who can get the economy going, and that's why there is such strong appeal or small business tax cuts and incentives for small business, those types of policies on the Republican side that give everyone equal opportunity.
Let's just back up. I'll get you in there in just a second, Michelle. I just want to pull back for just a minute and remind everybody, which is that women are a majority of the voting bloc in this country. More women turn out to the polls than men, which is an important point to make. But women are not, all women don't vote the same. In fact, if we look very closely, we see very different minorities vote very different than white women. Married women vote very differently than unmarried women. So we want to be clear about, identifying different types of women and how they'll vote. And of course, some women are Republicans and some are Democrats, and a lot of women are also independents. But it's very interesting. I just want to talk about the difference between married and unmarried women, because in the last election in 2008, unmarried women, which are one of the fastest growing demographic groups in this country, they were key to Barack Obama's victory. They broke for Obama over McCain 70% to 29%, and married women preferred McCain 50% to 47%. So let me ask you about that, Michelle. Is there a certain way that each of these candidates will be talking to those different types of women?
Absolutely. Norah, over the last week or so, American Crossroads put out a web ad, a web video, I should say, that's, if you look at it on its face, it's actually very compelling. And one of the things that they talk about right up front, this is geared towards women voters, and it basically says, yes, there is a war on women, and the war on women is the Obama economy. And you go ahead, you take a look at the ad, and on its face, it's compelling. It talks about a lot of the statistics that Leslie was talking about earlier, but I think that when a lot of women look at the web ad and then dig a little bit further, women are going to say to themselves, it is about the economy. It is about how I sustain my life and I sustain my family and I take care of all of those that I love. And so if you look at that ad on its face, and you might, kind of for a quick moment say, well, you know what, Mitt Romney is speaking to me in this ad. But then you go back, and again, I have to go back to the damage that I think has been done to the Republican brand, when you have to go back and you say, okay, if it is about the economy, why are so many Republican legislators, and where does Mitt Romney stand, for example, on the Paycheck Fairness Act? Where do Republicans stand on making sure that women get equal pay for equal work? So, I think that those are a lot of the issues that women are going to be looking at, and we will see, for example, Mitt Romney going after women and saying, just as he did, for example, when he met with the NAACP earlier this week, and said, if you're looking for someone who's going to help the African American community, I'm your man. You're going to see the same thing if you're looking for people who are going to, the presidential candidate who's going to help women, I am your man. But people are going to dig further and ask very specific questions. How do you feel about the Violence Against Women Act? How do you feel about the Paycheck Fairness Act? How do you feel about equal pay for equal work? And I think all of those things are very important to any woman who cares about the economy.
Stephanie, you helped get Democratic women elected to Congress. What about that idea that unmarried women, which are a strong constituency for the Democratic base, probably have been hit the hardest by this poor economy? Are they disillusioned with their own party?
No, I would say that this group of women are very focused on where the solutions are coming. They are having hard times, absolutely, and they are looking for a future that they can be hopeful for. It was interesting when Emily's List just conducted this set of polling, we found just in the policy settings of what they're looking for again, these are independent women. This is right smack in the middle. No Republicans, no Democrats, just independents in here. 69% of them, 69% of these women found the Ryan budget's cuts to Medicaid, to Medicare, to housing, to education, a convincing reason to vote against the Republicans, a convincing reason. And so when we talk about the future, independent women, particularly this particular group of independent women, are looking for solutions. They're looking for jobs. They're looking for economic hope. And unfortunately for this country, what they've been hearing out of the Republican Party is another layer of conversation, which is rolling back women's rights to health care, having a debate about birth control, and they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about where the jobs are, and that is really where this election is going to be, and it's going to be won on that.
And Norah, this is Maria, and what I find so puzzling about what Stephanie just said, because I do think in terms of women and the rhetoric that Republicans have used, we all agree, I believe, on this panel that it's the economy and economic issues that are number one for women, whether they're married, unmarried, Black, Latino, Asian, I mean, everywhere in America, it's the economic issues. So when you look at Romney's rhetoric and he focuses on tries to focus on him being the best economic steward, you would think that that is the best argument for Republicans as they go forward, especially as they try to bash this president on the unemployment numbers, for example, and on his economic policies. And then it's just so puzzling when they veer off to talking about these social issues. And you have governors in Virginia and state legislators in Michigan banning the women legislators because they use the word vagina when they want to say that they want to defund Planned Parenthood. These are all issues that they have to know are hurting them among what you said, Norah, is the biggest voting bloc in the country, which are women in general. So it's very puzzling what kind of strategy the Republicans are using when, in fact, they believe the economy is their strong suit here, even though what Stephanie said is absolutely right. The Ryan budget plan will absolutely be disastrous for women across the board, and that's the message that the Democrats are going to keep focusing on. But just in terms of the rhetoric, it's very puzzling to me that then you have all of these Republicans across the board in all these different states talking about social issues, and when, in fact, that gives heat to the whole issue of that there is a Republican war on women.
Leslie, you want to take a whack at that?
Thank you, Norah. Every time I was like, listen to everyone. I love being on with these dynamic women. You know, that's the beauty of this. We have very, differing opinions.
Absolutely.
We all have dinner and break bread and read the same books, but that's another joke. But I will say this, truth be told, let's break it down. A lot of what we have seen in the last few elections is that it's white women particularly that are moving the most, the pendulum swings the most. We know that Republicans tend to do well with married women, working women, college educated, and that certainly the base of the Democratic support comes from single women, women of color. But there's a lot more movement now when it talks about the economy, yes, but break that down. What does that mean? To many, I would say I'm with Resurgent Republican. We've been surveying a lot of suburban women and independent women who voted for the president in 2008 but really undecided and are willing to take a second look or maybe a first look at the Republican Party. And they say things like the health care law, it's not top of mind for them, but what are the restrictions it's going to place on business? How is that going to affect my family if we can't get a good paying job? Because women feel there's a lot of underemployment. And that personal feeling that this economy is not as strong as it could be because of this president directly falls at the feet of the president's policies, positions, and that's the deciding factor when they're in the voting booth. They can call these names, we can use this heated rhetoric, but it is the president putting forth policies that grow their local communities, that grow their environment, and they don't believe so.
But Leslie, what do you think of the Republican rhetoric, as Maria talked about, and the focus on social issues, whether it's been on contraception or abortion, etc.?
I think there's an argument to be made that on both sides of the aisle, it sounded like you could use against the rhetoric in terms of the war on women. I do not give Republicans a full pass on this because there's certainly voices, not only on this issue, but numerous other issues on the right and the left that say things that sound sexist, I'll be straight with that sound as if they're insensitive to the needs of a diverse group of women. But overall, when you're looking at the top of the ticket, I don't think that's what the Republican Party stands for, and it's certainly not what Mitt Romney's talking about.
I want to talk about our Ann Romney and Michelle Obama in a minute, but I want to also talk about the glass ceiling in terms of women in politics. This is something, as a reporter who's also a woman, that I've covered ever since I was 25 years old and was a reporter for Roll Call about the number of women in Congress. And this last election, we saw for the first time in a generation the number of women in Congress decline. And we have just 6 women governors, which is a smaller number than we've had in the past. And Stephanie, you are working to get more Democratic women in Congress. Why is there this ambition gap, if there is? Are there women disgusted with what's happening in Washington and they don't even want to be part of the elected body?
Well, let me just start with some good news here, which is at Emily's List, we have a historic number of Democratic women running for office this year. We've never had this many Democratic women running for the United States Senate. We have 12 significant races going on. When you look at the competitive Senate races this year, Cook says there's 14 competitive Senate races. 7 of them have women in it. So that's the good news here. The House also seeing increased numbers of Democratic women running in very, very strong races. So what we saw in 2010 was a Republican wave that caused a lot of Democratic losses. Well, there's more Democratic women serving in the House than there are Republican women, so when we lost those Democrats, we lost more women. I can also say that we've actually made up that loss through House special elections this year. So it wasn't a huge decline. It was a decline of a couple that we made up in the last 12 months with the elections of some women across the country. So the good news is moving forward, we're going to continue growing in how many women are serving in Congress. This is a huge deal, though. I mean, Emily's List has been around 27 years. We're making strides every election cycle to add to this number, but right now Congress is 17% women. Yeah. 17%. I mean, that is outrageous. The United States of America is 78th in the world of democracies in the percentage of women in elected bodies. It's unacceptable for this country, and it's something all of us on this panel, I am sure, are committed to fixing. We need more women to run, and we need more women and men to support that drive for representative democracy. And I mean, Emily's List, since the Republican takeover of the House in January of 2011, in fact, has tripled its membership. We have gone from 400,000 to 1.5 million who are committed to adding strong pro-choice Democratic voices to Congress, but pro-choice.
And on top of that, we also need more women of color running and winning these races. I mean, I think the bottom line is that we need a Congress that reflects America. Right now, the United States Congress does not reflect what this country looks like, and I think that that is a detriment to society as a whole because we don't have the diversity of voices that are needed to represent all of the communities that make up this great country.
I would say also, I mean, it's a great point. I would say, I mean, not only do we need more members of Congress, we need more female members of Congress, and we need a more diverse Congress, but quite honestly, as someone who considers himself an independent, I have to believe with so many people now leaving the Democratic Party, leaving the Republican Party, and self-identifying as independent simply because they can't stand Congress at all, you know, I think what we really should be saying is we need a Congress that works. We need a Congress that represents the American people, that actually puts forth legislation, that votes on legislation, that doesn't, you know, engage in tactics like the filibuster, and actually does something to help a country where so many people are really hurting.
I actually think that if we do elect more women, Congress will work much better. I mean, let's just look at the ladies of the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats. There was a great story that was done recently about how they all have lunch, they go out to dinner. Yes, they don't agree on every issue, but they have come together and worked together on legislation that they know they can agree on that helps women, that helps families. And I think that that's a page that the guys can frankly learn from. And again, if we elect more women to Congress, I think that Congress would work better.
Let's talk now about
if we don't have an equal number. Well, this is our vision here at Emily's List. I know we're across the board here. I mean, just think what it would look like if we looked at a United States Senate that had an equal number of women and men. It looked like our nation, what we would get done for the people of the country. It is, I mean, we're just talking about the number of Latinas. There's only been 7 Latinas who have served in the United States House of Representatives in the history of our nation.
Yep.
That's outrageous. We have to change this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mitt Romney and President Obama, and we'll talk about their spouses. And want to bring up Jen Crawford here at CBS, interviewed Mitt and Ann Romney recently. And Ann Romney said that she hopes that her husband chooses a female vice president. I guess the first question is, if Mitt Romney doesn't choose a woman, what are people going to say? That he doesn't listen to his wife? Yeah. I mean, Leslie, it was a good plug certainly by Ann. So you think Ann
I'll take that one.
Yeah, either Ann was revealing something, which is that he will choose a woman, or just she was sort of sharing out loud what she'd like to happen. How about that?
I would go with the latter. I think that was probably her personal opinion. I certainly don't have inside knowledge on that. It's a great idea, especially since we're hearing more about women. We talked about women on the Democratic ticket being at the top of the ticket last go around, and certainly second part of our ticket. Keeping women engaged and having that opportunity to be on a presidential ticket is extremely important. And we want to keep that momentum going. I think she's exactly right. More than anything, though, I think realistically we have to look at what the backbench looks like. Who are the governors or the state elected leaders that are really on the rise, getting policies done in their own state, have that executive management position, leadership, that can serve, in my opinion, on a national ticket and be ready to take the reins. And there are many women on the right and the left that are coming up, and they're going to have their own time in the sun, and I certainly hope that Governor Romney is looking at these candidates. But I see it coming very, very soon.
Sure. I mean, I was out there on the campaign trail certainly in 2008, and as you know, certainly Sarah Palin became very controversial, but at the same time there were also women who had never been interested in politics that turned out at rallies because she was a different type of figure, because she was a mother and she had 5 children, and there are very few elected Republican women in office. So the idea of having a woman on a Republican ticket, that was the first certainly for her, and it got people interested in a way that they were not interested in the past. It didn't end up redounding to John McCain's benefit in the long run.
To be fair, what it did do, it energized the base, it generated a lot of fundraising. It really propelled and closed that gap for John McCain. But you talk about women getting excited, don't forget New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez or Oklahoma Mary Fallon. I mean, there's and certainly many other Democratic women. We are making progress, but Hillary Clinton did a lot to make that progress.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget the number of women that were the last ones in with Barack Obama, and actually many of them were the first ones out once the economy did start to improve. So these women haven't gone anywhere. They're waiting for the right voices. They really are. They're waiting for the right voices and the right leadership.
Well, if I can just, on this point, though, something we have to be careful about, and it's not just because there's a woman on a ticket that the women are going to vote for that woman.
Right.
It's about the policies that those candidates are standing by. And so if Mitt Romney picks a woman to be his vice presidential candidate, good for him. But the truth of the matter is they still have to defend policies that, as far as I can tell, in every polling I have seen, that independent women aren't going to stand by. And they're still going to vote for the Democrat because of the policies. They're just not voting because of gender. And that's something we have to be careful about.
And that's why ultimately I think that McCain did not win with Sarah Palin, even with all of the excitement. And I do think that there was new excitement with her on the ticket. But ultimately, her policies, the way that she talked to the base, was, I think, hurtful to John McCain in terms of the percentage of women that he needed to get in order to win. So Stephanie's absolutely right. It's about the policies. And, you know, Mitt Romney, I think, does have some good Republican women to choose from. I believe, though, that Ann Romney walked back that comment a little bit after she said that, because I think she realized that probably it's not going to happen. But, you know, that, again, is a comment that could get Republican women excited. And at this point, when you have the enthusiasm on the Democratic side larger than the enthusiasm on the Republican side, they're going to need that as much as they're going to need the policies to speak to women, which unfortunately they don't have.
Michelle, final word?
Final word. I'm not saying this in defense of Sarah Palin, but if you go back to 2008, one of the things that she did for a large portion of American women was that for the stay-at-home mom who felt that they had been left out of the feminist movement, she gave them a voice that said you can be interested in politics, you can be interested in policy. Women's issues are all issues, and she got all types of different types of women engaged in politics.
Well, guys, this has been a great roundtable. I'm sorry we didn't get to 50 Shades of Grey, but we'll leave that for the next time.
And don't forget
That'd be
Magic
a
Mike.
very interesting panel.
Exactly. That'll be a very interesting one. Exactly.
It's going to be a new movie. Dana Brunetti is producing that, so it'll be very good. That's my also Dana.
That's all the time we have for today. I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out, and be sure to tune in to Sunday's Face the Nation for more on Campaign 2012 and some highlights from this conversation. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.